welcome back to my channel. I'm Jordy. Thank you for hanging out with me. And we find ourselves right now heading over the Wonderwood Expressway Bridge. It's really breezy again today. Typical of Jacksonville. I don't know why it's been so breezy lately, but it is. So I'll probably be getting blown all over the road. But I thought I'd turn the camera on because we've got some beautiful Florida intercoastal lowlands here. And might be some nice scenery from the bridge. So I think this is the newest bridge in Jacksonville. It was constructed probably within the last 10 or 15 years. A big hurricane evacuation route for the naval base and stuff, for the beach area. And one of our many bridges over the intercoastal waterway is called the Wonderwood Expressway. So heading over the Wonderwood, and we find ourselves today in another installment, another chapter of the highly anticipated history of the French and Spanish and Indians in Jacksonville and St. Augustine, Florida. Excited to go to Fort Caroline today is where we'll be headed and see what we can learn about Fort Caroline and the French encampment there and the Spanish and the French and the Indians, the battles that took place. Should be cool. Cruising over Wonderwood right now, being blown around the road. The gales are howling. And hope you're enjoying the Jacksonville scenery. Cloudy day today. Cars are really moving out. Alright, I just wanted to show a little bit of that transition, that move over the Wonderwood. We're on our way to Fort Caroline, tuning out now, and we will be back shortly at Fort Caroline. Jordy out. Alright, we're back. We're coming into Fort Caroline. Thought I'd turn on the camera because it's really beautiful around here. Lots of old live oaks. And here we are on the left. I've only been here once before. Excited to come back. This is a national park, Fort Caroline National Museum. Part of the National Park Service. Look at this canopy of live oaks and Spanish moss. Timucuan Visitor Center. That's the Timucua Indians.
Okay, let's go check out the French encampment of Fort Caroline. It's kind of tucked away back behind the woods and on the St. Johns River. Alright, we're going to wander back there and go check out the fort. It occurs to me that making videos is not really an easy thing to do. Kudos to all the successful channels out there who make it look easy because, you kind of rehearse or review what you want to say and do, but it never really comes out how you expected it. And it's much hard to keep yourself sounding coherent and intelligent. So, hopefully you're enjoying my videos. And I'm aiming for mildly likable, but we'll settle for tolerable. And so hopefully I'm in the former, the mildly likable camp. But if I'm not, maybe you'll stay tuned and find reason to upgrade me at some point from tolerable to mildly likable. So, yeah, cruising down here to Fort Caroline, the French encampment. I'll look at the info up here, but I believe it was first kind of settled in 1564. So we're talking 16th century. We're talking almost 500 years ago. That's pretty wild. 500 years. 500 years. Here we have the Timucua Indians. I'm going to speak a little bit about them. I guess this was supposed to be like a Timucua hut. The Timucua brought us grains of roasted maize, smoked lizards or other wild animals, and various kinds of roots, some for foods, others for medicine. And when they discovered that we were more interested in metals and minerals, they gave us some of these as well. In 1564, Jacques Lemoyne, Timucuan chief Saturiba's men crafted a shelter similar to the one seen here so Saturiba could sit and watch the colonists build their settlement. The Timucua gave of their bounty, gold and silver jewelry, pearls, animal hides, and medicinal plants. In return, Chief Saturiba sought a war alliance to help its people. When the alliance never materialized, Timucuan assistance dwindled. And Jacques Lemoyne again says, if the natives had not supplied us daily from their own stores, some of us certainly would have perished from starvation, especially those who did not know how to use a gun in the hunt. Yeah, I think the Timucua really saved the French's hides. Well, I'll get to that, but yeah, there were stories of famine and starvation. I guess this is like a Timucua canoe. Okay, this is not Fort Caroline. Onto the fort. Okay, here we are at the fort. It's probably hard to see from here, and this is the St. Johns River. We'll get up closer to it. But we're at a placard here at the entrance, and I'll read off some of this info. So, building La Caroline. Measuring a piece of ground in the shape of a triangle, the colonists laid out their fort and settlement using shovels, cutting hooks, and hatchets. They cleared the site of trees. The fort and storage barns were erected quickly, with other buildings soon to follow. The first guardhouse, built in the center of the fort, stood too high and was blown over by fierce winds. Can attest to that. It's super windy here. Baking ovens were placed outside the fort to keep fire away from the fort's powder magazine. Once the common buildings were completed, the colonists set to work building their homes. The original size and exact placement of the colony and fort are still a mystery to historians. In 1964, 400 years after the establishment of La Caroline, the fort you see before you was built by the National Park Service. It is not a reconstruction of the original. It's based on educated guesswork and serves only to bring the fort story to life. Every one of us, noblemen, soldiers, workmen, sailors, worked hard to get our post ready to shelter us from the weather and protect us against enemies. Again, Jacques Lemoyne. All right, let's get up to the fort. Here's another placard over here. Okay, this one says building a village in the wilderness. Joy was in the air after 7 French ships arrived with supplies and men, women, and children in August 1565. The colonists went to work completing their village outside the fort. Men sewed logs into timbers, framed houses, and thatched roofs. Women roasted pigs and goats, made stews, baked bread, wove cloth, and cared for children. Little did the colonists know, however, that troubles and tragedy were brewing. Okay, I think over here we have one of their ovens. They said the ovens were outside the fort. Now walking up to the fort, as I said, right on the St. Johns River. Hopefully my audio is not getting blown out because the wind is whipping. Whipping, I tell you. This exhibit symbolizes the French colonists' quest for religious freedom and desire to improve their lives. Honor their memory and ensure your safety by not climbing on the walls or cannons. Okay, entering the fort. Fort La Caroline. Helicopters, the naval bases right here on the river. We already have the Spanish down in St. Augustine, about 30 miles south of here. So here we go. At the break of dawn on September 20th, 1565, about 400 Spanish troops under Pedro Menendez de Aviles stormed the sparsely defended fort and massacred 130 people. About 70 colonists fled into the woods or to ships anchored in the river. Those survivors who made it to the ships headed back to France. On September 23rd, Menendez left most of his soldiers behind to hold the fort, and with only 50 men rushed back to defend his newly settled colony of St. Augustine. Okay, so that was September 20th. So let's rewind a little bit. Major events before and after the massacre. And they say of the massacre, the Spanish committed a horrible execution, each trying to outdo the other in slaying. I would not find greater cruelty among wild beasts. So, going back a little bit, we have September 4th, 1565. The Spanish discover the French fleet. Pedro Menendez forces 4 of Jean Ribault's French ships to flee from the mouth of the St. Johns River before all of the fresh supplies are unloaded. September 8th to 10th, about a week later, the French attempt a preemptive strike. Jean Ribault and about 500 French soldiers sail south, hoping to confront the Spaniards. Sandbars stop them opposite St. Augustine, and winds drive them further south. So again, the treacherous sandbars of St. Augustine, and you'll see a video from me in a following chapter of Matanzas Inlet. About a week after that, September 16th to 19th, the Spanish march north. Pedro Menendez, realizing that La Caroline is virtually defenseless, and his soldiers march 38 miles north to attack the French colony. I can't imagine marching at that point in time. I mean, through just totally wild lands of palmetto jungles, and it must have, I can't even begin to imagine what that must have been like. About a week after that, disaster hits the French fleet. Before Jean Ribault can turn back to La Caroline, a hurricane, September's hurricane month here, wrecks at least 2 of his ships south of St. Augustine by Matanzas Inlet. Nearly 260 soldiers drowned, and those are shark-infested waters, so think about that. 140 make it ashore. 2 other ships wreck near Cape Canaveral, even further south. And about a week later, September 28th, river halts survivors. Starving and thirsty, the shipwrecked survivors trudge northward but are blocked by a swift river channel at an inlet. Okay, if you watch one of my next videos, you'll know that at Matanzas Inlet, the Spanish find Ribault, and again, slay all of his men, except save, I think, a few musicians and those claiming to be Catholics. So the Spaniards were not done with the French after the massacre at La Caroline. Pedro Menendez tracked down 2 separate groups of starving, shipwrecked French soldiers at an inlet south of St. Augustine. Okay, this is what I was just talking about. Menendez ordered his troops to kill nearly all of them, including Jean Ribault, but spared 30 who were Catholic, craftsmen, or musicians. The inlet became known as Matanzas, Spanish for slaughters. Then finally, the final chapter in all of this crazy saga between the Spanish and the French is seeking revenge. 3 years later, in 1568, a French force led by Dominique de Gorges defeated the Spaniards with Timucuan help here at La Caroline. The French hanged 200 and burned the fort, which the Spaniards had renamed San Mateo. Mission accomplished, the French sailed home. So, if you're following my history stories, it's some crazy history between the Spanish and the French. Many battles fought right on these grounds that we walk on. Hard to imagine the battles that were fought here. Slaying people more violently than wild beasts. Tough times. 500 years ago. A triangular walled fort here at Fort Caroline. And we got the St. John's River. Okay, there's a couple more interesting tidbits to mention. We'll continue to give you a little tour of the fort here. Again, the placard said this is a reconstruction. This isn't like, obviously, the actual fort that was built 500 years ago. But it was supposed to have looked something along these lines. There's another placard over here that talks about some unsolved mysteries of this fort. Unsolved mysteries. You go check those out. I'll tell you about the unsolved mysteries of La Caroline. Okay, a tidbit here, a shred there. La Caroline's tale is full of unknowns. Historic maps and engravings provide clues about the size, shape, and location of the fort, but nothing definitive has been found in the ground. Who were the African colonists mentioned briefly by one of the Frenchmen? Where did the Spaniards camp just before the massacre? And why didn't Jean Ribault's son, Jacques, fire his ship's cannon at the Spaniards? The questions go on and on. 300 men went out in this armada to Florida. There were many Africans of unrecorded countries. That's a quote from a Frenchman, Robert Melange, captured by the Spaniards in 1565. So Robert Melange is saying that 300 men went out in this armada to Florida, and there were many Africans of unrecorded countries. And we have no idea who these people were or where they came from. Interesting. So Ribault's son, Jacques, never fired on the Spanish. Here's a picture depicting it. The fort. And the river. Like I said, just some really interesting history here. Mysteries, history, all tucked in on the St. John's River. A lot of it is the story of gold, the Spanish and their gold, and the French trying to steal it, and everybody trying to gain power and control over the area. So this concludes our little tour of Fort Caroline. Hope you enjoyed. Let's head on out. right, thanks for watching. Please like, subscribe, comment below of what you think about the stories, the battles, and we'll see you in the next video. Adios. One bit of bonus footage. This whole Fort Caroline area is part of the Timucuan Nature Preserve, and I've hiked these trails back in here, and they're really cool, especially at the entrance. So I thought I'd just give a quick little tour of this Timucuan Preserve Spanish Pond area entrance. So hang out and check out a little bit of the beautiful Florida scenery. All right, so this is the Spanish Pond area of the National Park Service, the Fort Caroline National Memorial, and this is the Timucuan Ecological and Historic Preserve. This placard here talks a little bit more about the Spanish that we were just discussing, and it says, in 1565, the Spaniards slogging through wetlands like Spanish Pond to overtake Fort de la Caroline saw an inhospitable environment. Today we see backyards. An open, pristine pine flatwoods once surrounded the spot. Today a fragmented forest with thick underbrush exists. Pristine or backyard, nature is still alive at the Spanish Pond. So we'll just take a quick stroll down here, and this is this amazing Timucuan Preserve at Fort Caroline. And I think the trails go for miles. I've gone all the way back to the river, and they go 3, 4, 5 miles back there. I might have some pictures. Maybe I can insert some. Don't hold your breath, but potentially I'll insert some pictures. There's an old foundation of an old house back there. I might have one of that. This, I guess, is where the Spanish Pond was, or is. But yeah, Timucuan Nature Preserve. We'll go down here just a little bit more. If I recall, there was a whole really cool bed of ferns. Really beautiful back in here. Well, I think our progress might get halted. It's looking like it could be wet back here. Well, not too bad. But I'm not going to go much further. It's already in the afternoon. But you can get an idea for our Florida landscape. Go up a little bit further. Oh, sorry, there's a lot of roots stumbling around on these roots. Yeah, I remember this part is kind of cool. Another boardwalk section. All right, you come off that boardwalk and then you come into this amazing pine forest. It really is a cool park. I don't have time to go back there further, and I didn't lock up the stuff at my bike, so I'm going to turn around here, head back into the light, back down the boardwalk, and ultimately back home. And this will conclude our historical mini-series on Fort Caroline, St. Augustine, and still to come, Matanzas Inlet, but actually filmed that yesterday, so you shall see. Alright, thanks for watching. See you in the next video. And we're exiting out of the Timucuan Preserve.